Sourdough bread can seem a little bit daunting the first time you try it, but this recipe and method has stood up every time, creating some super tasty loaves. Welcome to today's video, guys. If you like it, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe so that you don't miss any more of my future uploads. Now let's get into today's recipe. Great sourdough bread starts off with a lovely, healthy starter. I will leave a link to how I make my starter and keep it lovely, happy and active in the description box, and also in a card floating above me here, which you can check out. And so the first thing you want to do is make sure that your starter is lovely and bubbly and happy, because we are going to use that to make our leaven or levain. This is essentially what we're going to use to make our dough rise. And in order to make 2 loaves, our leaven requires 50 grams of wholemeal flour and 50 grams of strong bread flour. You're going to mix that with equal parts water, so 100 mils of water. So I'm adding 2 to 3 teaspoons of my starter into a clean bowl, adding in my flours, adding in my water, mixing, and I'm going to let that sit for a couple of hours at room temperature until nice and bubbly and active, like you see here. And the length that this is going to take will depend on the temperature of your home. So if you think it's not ready, don't be afraid to give it a little bit of extra time. Stay tuned for how we are going to test the leaven to make sure that it is ready. For our bread dough, we will need 900 grams of strong bread flour, 100 grams of wholemeal bread flour, approximately 580 to 600 grams of lukewarm water, 20 grams of salt, and our active leaven. It's incredibly easy to get into the very technical of sourdough bread, but for the home baker, I think it's really important to keep things simple. And that is why I have said lukewarm water. As long as your water is not too hot, you're not going to go wrong. So as I said, we're going to test our leaven at the outset to make sure that it is ready to bake with. What we want to see when we add our leaven into the water, you can do this in a separate bowl if you wish. You want to see that leaven floating. If it sinks, your leaven needs a little bit more time. So let's get going on this loaf. Add your flour, your leaven, and about 580 mils of water into a mixing bowl and get to mixing. This will be quite a dense dough to begin with, quite shaggy, and you will find it difficult to incorporate all of that flour into the water. So you might find you have some dry flour at the bottom of your bowl. That is okay. You could absolutely use your hands for this. You could also use the dough hook on a mixer if you find this really hard work. Once mixed into a shaggy mixture, you're going to leave that settle on the counter for about 30 minutes. Just pop a damp tea towel over top, plastic container, something to keep it covered. After 30 minutes, we're going to add in our salt and approximately 50 mils of that water. So at this point we've added 580. Now we're adding another 50 mils and our 20 grams of salt. And we're going to use our fingers to stipple and turn the salt into the dough. You'll see it turns from quite wet and that shaggy mixture into something a lot more homogeneous. You'll already see that gluten starting to form, giving the dough that lovely stretchiness that we want to see. After the dough has rested again on the counter for between 20 and 30 minutes, we're going to start our series of stretch and folds, which develops the gluten strands in the bread. There are many different ways to do this, but I like to do it with a spatula. Feel free to use your hand. I'm going to pop my spatula down into the bottom of the bowl, stretch the dough upwards towards the ceiling, and fold it in on itself. Do that the whole way around the bowl, pop your lid back on, wait a further 20 to 30 minutes, and repeat. We're going to do this for a total of 4 hours before we come to do our final stretch and fold, at which point we will allow the dough to rest for 1 hour. And over the course of that 5 hours, the dough will significantly change in appearance and texture. And this is a great visual. We have some lovely air pockets developing in the dough. The gluten has developed, and we are now ready to do our bench rest. So again, there are fancy ways to do this, and you could absolutely use a dough scraper for this, but I like to keep the washing to a minimum, so I'm just going to use my trusty spatula and I'm going to cut the dough into 2 rough loaves. I have a 9-inch banneton and a 10-inch banneton, so one of my loaves will be slightly smaller than the other, but you could absolutely use a kitchen scales to weigh them equally if that's what you'd prefer. I'm just roughly eyeballing it. And just look how stretchy that dough has become with very minimal effort. That's what I love about this recipe. Although you're working on it over the course of a couple of hours, there's really very little time involved. So in order to do our first shape, I'm going to fold the dough over on itself entirely like you see here. Folding it back over itself entirely, flipping it over and tucking it in one final time before starting to develop tension in the dough by pulling it against my work surface in a diagonal and circular motion. This takes a bit of practice. It really comes with experience and getting to know your dough and how it handles in your particular conditions. So definitely try and take it for what it is and take each loaf that you prepare as a learning experience. I'm going to repeat the exact same steps with my second loaf and allow them to rest on the countertop, covered by a damp cloth again for another 20 to 30 minutes. And to bake my sourdough, I am going to be using bannetons today. I find that a banneton is the easiest way to make this recipe, but I have done sourdough in the past in a standard bread tin, and I will leave a link to that recipe in the description box below and also again in a card above my head. So you'll see after the initial bench rest that the dough has flattened out somewhat, but they haven't pancaked and drooped and liquefied all over the bench, which means we have achieved what we have set out to achieve. So we're going to do our final shape before adding them to the bannetons to rest overnight. I'm just repeating the exact same steps again, using my hands against the work surface to create tension in the dough, but not going overboard so as to create an overly tight crumb. Just doing this maybe 4 or 5 times to create a nice round ball, which I'm going to flour and pop smooth side down into my banneton to rest. That is it. I'm going to leave my dough out on the countertop at room temperature overnight. If your conditions are above, say, 22, 23 degrees Celsius, you might want to pop it into the fridge overnight and then just take it out a couple of hours before you want to bake it the following morning. So definitely judge that one yourself. The following day, we've got a lovely aeration and rise on the bread. It is ready to bake. And I'm a big fan of the cast iron Dutch oven to make sourdough bread. So to prepare my Dutch oven, I want to get this as hot as possible. So I'm popping it into the fan oven at 250 degrees Celsius for about 30 minutes to get it nice and piping hot. You can see I can't help but celebrating when my sourdough comes out of the banneton without sticking. And again, I am not fancy schmancy with this. I am simply scoring the top of my bread to allow some of that steam to escape. You can make this as pretty or as basic as you like. Pop the lid on to the Dutch oven. Into the oven it goes at 230 degrees Celsius. So reduce your oven temperature once you pop this in. You're going to bake it for 19 to 20 minutes before removing the lid from your Dutch oven. And once you've removed your lid, you're going to bake it for a further 20 minutes. Remove from the oven, allow to cool completely if you are able. And if your willpower is greater than mine, it never ever survives a full cool, although it should, because technically your bread is still baking on the inside when you remove it from the oven until it is fully cooled. You can see there we've got that lovely oven spring, we've got that lovely liquefier where we've scored, and this simple method really creates a very beautiful loaf. It tastes great, it's very mild, and it slices beautifully. And guys, if you liked today's video, please give it a big thumbs up, it really helps me out, and please don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on your notification bell so that you don't miss any more of my future uploads. Thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you back on my channel for my next video. Bye!